So let's start. So these are the topics that we're going to discuss for this meeting. Classification of variables, research title, statement of the problem, and the scope and delimitation and significance of the study. Right, so lesson objectives. At the end of the lesson, the students can determine the classifications and variables, differentiate the classifications of variables, discuss the guidelines in formulating a research title, differentiate the general problem from the specific problems, specify the different variables, sub-variables, and indicators of the study, and cite the potential benefits of the study. Right, first, classification of variables. Right. A variable is any factor or property that a researcher measures, controls, and or manipulates. It is also the changing quantity or measure of any factor, trait, or condition that can exist in different amounts or types. So basically, when we say variable, it is defined as anything that has a quality that varies. We say variables, these are the items that you are going to measure in your study. Meaning these are the types of data that you need to obtain for your study. It is also a logical set of attributes, characteristics, numbers, or quantities that can be measured or counted. It is also called a data item. This variable is also called a data item since variables are like containers of data, meaning they contain the information that you needed in order to analyze the topic or the area that you want to conduct a research. Okay, for example, personality traits and game design preferences of online gamers in Davao City. Okay, based on this title, the variables of the research or of the study are personality traits and game design preferences. So these variables of this specific study are the ones that the researchers are going to measure. The researchers will measure the personality traits and the preferences, meaning the researchers have to determine these indicators or these variables. You also have level of speech anxiety and academic performance of senior high school students. So this specific study, the variables that the researchers are going to study are the level of speech anxiety and the academic performance. We also have the effects of microfinance in Palangka village households. This study is like going to measure if the microfinance has significant effects to the specific dimension of the households in Palangka village. So with this example on this study, you need to specify which dimension or what are the indicators or the indicators that you can say that microfinance has an effect or doesn't have an effect. So these are the classification of variables. We have numeric variables, categorical, experimental, non-experimental, and variables according to the number being studied. First, we have numeric variables. Numeric variable have values that describe a measurable quantity as a number, like how many or how much. Okay, basically, when you say numeric variables used in demographic study or number of population or in a census. And we have two types of numeric variables. We have the continuous and discrete. Say continuous, any value obtained by measuring. So any value that we can measure, such as the height, time, age, and temperature. We also have discrete. In discrete, we're going to count. Wait lang Okay, in discrete, any value obtained by counting, such as number of cars, number of children, etc. So these are the two types of numeric variables. Continuous, meaning you measure. Say discrete, you count. We also have categorical variables. Categorical variables are variables with values that describe a quality of a data unit, like what type or which category. So basically, when we say categorical, it refers to the characteristics of the data, meaning you classify according to the quality of the data. And we have four types of categorical variables. We have ordinal, nominal, dichotomous, and polychotomous. When we say ordinal variables, they can take a value which can be logically ordered or ranked. Meaning, in ordinal, you need to rank or you need to scale. Like for example, yung mga Likert scale, ordinal variables din siya. Needs analysis or needs assessment. These type of research studies are dealing with ordinal variables. We also have nominal variables whose values cannot be organized in a logical manner. We also have dichotomous variables, represents only two categories, meaning the options in this type of variable is only two. And we also have polychotomous variables, meaning the options are several. Okay, for example, this is an ordinal variable. Halimbawa, the questions. How satisfied are you with our products? And the respondents of your study have 5 options on how they're going to rate the statement or the question. Or how happy are you with the customer service? So it depends upon the instrument. So in ordinal variables, you're going to use Likert scale. So depende siya if 5-point Likert scale or 7-point Likert scale. When we say 5-point Likert scale, example is ito. You have 5 options. Ang 7-point Likert scale, you have 7 options. Sa when you rate or when you scale a question or a statement. Sa nominal variables naman, you only have, what do you call this? You have either 2 or more options. You're not going to rate, but you just have to select. It's different from ordinal kasi you're going to scale, you're going to rate. Ito, you're just going to select. What's the specific answer for a specific question in the instrument. So ang kaibahan nito pagdating sa when it comes to the instrument, when you're dealing with ordinal variables, the research instrument should be the same. If the question number, if you have, for example, if you have 15 questions for your research instrument, and then you're dealing with ordinal variables, when you construct or when you use an instrument which deals with ordinal variables, dapat pantay siya lahat. Kung 5-point Likert scale, dapat yung each question in the instrument is that you have 5 options. The respondents should have 5 options when they rate each statement or question in the instrument. Whereas dito naman sa nominal variables, it depends if you have 2 or more options to choose when the respondents will answer the research instrument. Kasi magbe-based yung options niyo ng respondents will be based on the type of question. Halimbawa ito, how would you describe your behavioral pattern? So, depende rin sa what you call that, theoretical framework na gagamitin nyo when it comes to what what is that? Determining the behavioral pattern. Kasi there are a lot of theories that can be used when it comes to measuring or determining the behavior. So ito, for example, kung extrovert or introvert ba or ambivert. So meaning sa this type of question may tatlong options. So what is your gender? Only have two options. Color of the hair, maraming options. So sa nominal variables, the type of instrument is that you have mag-vary. The number of options on each question will vary. Whereas in ordinal, the number of options from each question should be the same. Okay? Sa dichotomous variables naman, only two options. For example, heads or tails, male or female, rich or poor, Democrat or Republican, or pass or fail, under age 65 or 65 and over. Wala na ko na-pilang. Sa polycotomous, you have more than two options. Like for example, if you are in junior high school, then you will be asked, what is your grade level in junior high school? So you have 4 levels man, grade 7, 8, 9, 10. Meaning, you have more than 2 options. So that's what we call polycotomous variables. We also have experimental variables. We have independent variables, dependent variables, and extraneous variables. When we say independent variables, they're usually the ones being manipulated by the researchers, or usually manipulated in an experiment. When we say dependent variables, usually affected by the manipulation of the independent variable, meaning the result of dependent variables will depend on the independent variables. We cannot manipulate dependent variables because the result of these variables will depend on the independent variables. We also have extraneous variables. These are already existing variables during the conduct of an experiment and could influence the result of the study. Okay, let's try to see some examples. Okay, ito, tardiness and academic performance of senior high school students. In this research, you have two variables, the tardiness and the academic performance, in which case the independent variable in this study is the tardiness and the dependent variable is the academic performance, which means that this type of research, the researchers will try to determine or examine if tardiness can affect the academic performance of the senior high school students. Meaning in tardiness is the variable that can be manipulated by the researchers, while the academic performance is the one that cannot be manipulated by the researchers. It's because it will depend on the results of the independent variable, which is the tardiness. We also have level of speech anxiety and academic performance of senior high school students. In this research, there are two variables, the level of speech anxiety and academic performance, wherein the researchers will try to examine if the level of speech anxiety of the senior high school students can affect their academic performance. But you need to be, you need to be specific when it comes to which type of academic performance, because, for example, in this first study, the tardiness and academic performance, not all the subjects of the respondents or of the senior high school students can be affected by the tardiness. So meaning the possible subjects that the researchers should deal with are those subjects that are kind of first period subjects, kasi those yun lang naman usually malilate yung students. Ito namang sa level of speech anxiety and academic performance, You need to be specific which academic performance, which subject, because not all subjects are, what do you call that, are needed or prerequisite yung communication skills. So for example, in this case, pwede yung gagamitin ninyo na yung subject to refer academic performance is yung oral communication and context, because that specific subject is needed with oral communication skills. So you need to be specific, but you can specify that in your, what do you call that, definition of terms at saka sa scope and delimitation of the study. For example, ito, title of research, an experiment on the methods of teaching and language achievement among, elementary pupils. In this research, the independent variable is the method of teaching, while the dependent variable is the language achievement. This type of research, the researchers want to examine if the method of teaching can affect the language achievement of the study. Meaning, the independent variable will always depend on the result of the independent variable. But we have to consider that there are other factors that can affect the language achievement of the elementary pupils. That's why we have what we call extraneous variable, meaning these are the variables that are outside of your study, but can actually affect in the real life situation. Like for example, ventilation facilities, physical ambience, or the conduciveness of the classroom. These are the possible external factors that can affect the language achievement of the elementary pupils. That's why they are called as extraneous variable. It's because they're outside of your methods of research. Wala siya sa variables na kinikonsider nyo, but can actually affect. We also have use of gardening tools and types of fertilizer, their effects and the amount of harvest. In this research, the independent variables are use of gardening tools and types of fertilizer, and the dependent, the amount of harvest. The amount of harvest will determine on the tools and the fertilizer being used for the gardening. But there are other factors that can affect the amount of harvest, which are the humidity level or the types of seeds and plants. So, ganun siya. That's the difference between independent, dependent, and extraneous. And we also have non-experimental variables, the predictor variable and criterion variable. When we say predictor variable, changes the other variable or variables in a non-experiment study. And when we say criterion variable, usually influenced by the predictor variable. Right, so in predictor criterion, this type of research is that you're going to predict a future result. For example, yung sa, the best example is yung mga mockboard test. Some institutions are using mockboard tests in order to determine possible results in the future, especially when their supposed products or graduates are going to, going to, tawag yan, mga licensure examinations, will take licensure examinations, for example, sa PRC, ganon. A specific institution that is using predictor criterion variable, itong University of Mindanao. Lahat ng courses na may licensure examination, they have mockboard examination. So the purpose of mockboard examination is to determine if their graduates can pass the licensure examination. when they take the PRC test, or whether it could be bar exam ba or sa ba siya na test. Okay, for example, the title of research, Competencies of Teachers and Students' Behavior in Selected Private Schools. Predictor variable is the competencies of teacher, while the criterion variable, the student's behavior. In this specific study, the research will determine if the competencies of the teacher can affect the behavior of the students. Ito naman, conduct of guidance counseling programs and degree of absenteeism and dropout rate among grade 8 classes. Predictor variable, conduct of guidance. Guys, please do not use the pointer or yung drawing. Basig marong turn na pod mo. Okay. Halimbawa, the predictor variable for the study, like the conduct of guidance counseling programs and the criterion degree of absenteeism and dropout rate. This specific study is trying to determine if conducting of guidance counseling programs can lessen the degree of absenteeism and dropout rate of the students. And another one, the types of facilities, administrators' profile, and parent support towards school effectiveness among public senior high school. So in this research, the predictor variable is the types of facilities, administrators' profile, and parent support. If these factors can affect the effectiveness of the school among the senior high school students. So basically, we say predictor criterion, we're going to predict a future result. Excuse me. Okay. Variables according to the number being studied. We have univariate study, bivariate study, and polyvariate study. When we say univariate study, only one variable is being studied. When we say bivariate study, two variables are being studied. Ito namang polyvariate study, more than two variables are being studied. I will show you examples of this. Let's go to the Schoology. Itong sa univariate studies, isang variable lang. Halimbawa, itong learning styles. Wait. Okay, for example, this study, learning styles of grade 11 senior high school students. Sa inyo ito, you were the respondents of this study. Kanila Abby. So this specific research has only one variable, which is why it is considered as univariate. They're only dealing with the learning styles of the grade 11 senior high school students. That's why yung yung SOP or statement of the problem that's why itong SOP nila Ito lang, what are the learning styles of grade 11 senior high school students? Ito lang SOP nila. Kasi they're only dealing with the learning styles of their respondents. Ito rin, itong multiple intelligence, sinivariate in na to. Multiple intelligences of grade 11 senior high school students. Kamurig hapon ng ano-ani. Respondents. Tingnan natin yung ano nila. So ito yung SOP nila. What are the multiple intelligences of the grade 11 students? So only one variable for this study. Meron pang isa. Ito, microfinance. Effects of microfinance. The effects of microfinance in selected households in Davao City. They're only dealing with the, they call that, the effects of microfinance. Wala silang other variables dito. Kundi kung ano lang yung specific dimension nila. So ganito. What are the socioeconomic effects of microfinance to the selected residents of Davao City in terms of the following? So this is just a an university study, pero meron siyang indicators. Marami siyang indicators kasi yung scope ng socioeconomic dimension is malaki siya. That's why you need to narrow down. We need to specify what are the indicators. But still, this is univariate variables. Ito naman sa bivariate study, two variables are being studied. Halimbawa, itong tardiness and academic performance, mobile phone usage and learning skills, ito sa performance task difficulty and actual difficulty, pero comparative study ito siya. Itong sa speech and sight and academic performance, sleep deprivation and stress level. These are examples of bivariate study. Sa polyvariate study, more than two variables. Itong kanila, sa ganito. Itong online games, learning skills, and academic performance. Tatlong variables ito. Napatoy isa. Asa ito ilan ni Cole? Itong financial literacy. Tatlong variables ito. The gender, the year level, at saka literacy level ng respondents. Because am I audible? Can you hear me? Because some of you cannot properly hear me. Okay lang?
Okay, kaya, sir.
Okay. So let's proceed to the research title. So generally, the title should summarize the main idea of the paper, concise statement of the main topic, include the major variables, show the relationship of the main variables of the study. So basically, when we say research title, it should be the synthesis or the summary of your paper. It means that when you read your title or when you formulate your title, it should contain the whole idea about your paper. For example, if I am the reader of your paper, title palandaan, I already have the idea what's the content or what's your research all about. When we say concise statement of the topic, meaning you need to condense what's the shortest possible title. Kasi you need to be specific with your title, and you should be mindful when it comes to the numbers of words in writing or formulating a research title. And your title should reflect the variables, major variables. No need to include the sub-variables. Example, yung sa pinakita ko earlier, yung sa microfinance, effects of microfinance in selected households in Davao City. Although the effects of microfinance, specifically, it's all about the effects in socioeconomic dimension. And there are various indicators in socioeconomic dimension, but no need to include them in the title, meaning only the major variables. No need to include all the indicators. And show the relationship of the main variables of the study, meaning in the title, the reader should have an idea what are the researchers going to deal with sa title pa lang. Halimbawa, yung levels of speech anxiety and academic performance. We'll have the idea automatically that we're going to relate if there's significant relationship between levels of speech anxiety and academic performance. Include the main task of the researcher about the major variables of the study and mention the participants in a general manner and a setting. So, as what I have said, you need to express what are going to do with the variables of the study. If we're going to correlate them, what's their significance, and then you need to include the participants. You need to provide the general na lang, general participants, not to be specific. Like for example, yung sa study na yung kayo ang research respondents, yung learning styles of grade 11 students, in order to protect the data of the respondents. Like no need to include which specific school. Although may ibang schools na ini-include nila yung year level at saka specific course. Pero generally, it's not necessary anymore to include the school, the setting, as long as you're going to mention the general participants of your research. Halimbawa, yung example yung sa microfinance, the effects of microfinance in selected households in Davao City. Actually, meron siyang specific, though selected households yung ginamit, pero meron siyang specific sa ganito siya. Basta sa may maa to sa Gem Village, malapit dyan sa Gem Village, dun siya. So selected households in Davao City lang yung nilagay pa in order to protect the personal information of the respondents. Wait lang ha. Okay. Abi na, wala ako naka-record. Okay, in research title, the researchers must be reminded of the following. In formulating the title, the researchers should avoid using words that serve no useful purposes and can mislead indexers. Okay, so in writing or formulating your title, you only need to use significant words for your title. No need to use words that cannot reflect the major or main idea uh, of your research. In many cases, the general problem or even the specific question that the researcher intends to answer when rewritten in a statement form can serve as the title. Title ito. So basically, sa uh, your research title and your statement of the problem are connected. Meaning, there should be connection when it comes to formulating your SOP and your title, because in writing your title and statement of the problem, you just have to reconstruct. You have to reconstruct. Meaning in research title, it should be in phrasal form, not in a sentence form. It's just a phrase. But in SOP, the connected siya, but it's in a sentence form, in interrogative form, interrogative sentence. The title must have 10 to 15 words. So usually, title must only contain 10 to 15 words. So you need to concise, you need to condense, and use specific words for your research title. Next one, you have the statement of the problem. Statement of the problem is also known as the research puzzle or the problematic. It is a formal articulation of the specific topic which you intend to address through research. In writing this section, you need to problematize your topic and explicitly identify the specific situation, problem, or issue. So basically, when you formulate your statement of the problem, you need to provide your research gap. What's the problem that you want to address? What's the issue? What's the situation, a specific situation that you want to deal with in your research? Why do you want to conduct a research in the first place? So you need to express that in your statement of the problem. But it should be in interrogative sentence. That's what I have said earlier. SOP should be in interrogative sentence. The ones that I have shown to you earlier. Like for example, what are the learning styles of grade 11 students? What are the multiple intelligences of grade 11 students? None. So in your SOP will also depending on the variables of your research. The number of your SOP will depend on the variables of your research. So pinakita ko kanina yung sample studies, for example, ito, learning styles, it only deals with one variable, meaning it only contains one SOP. Pero itong mga bivariate or polyvariate studies, they contain three or more, what do you call that? Three or more statement of the problems. Halimbawa itong tardiness in academic performance. This study has two variables, meaning yung questions niya, SOP niya, ito, tatlo. What is the frequency of tardiness of grade 12 senior high school students? What is the academic performance of grade 12 senior high school students? And SOP number 3, is there a significant relationship between tardiness and academic performance of grade 12 senior high school students? Kasi yung purpose ng study is to determine if there's significant relationship between the tardiness and academic performance of the students, grade 12 senior school students. But in order to obtain an answer of that question, first, you need to identify or determine the frequency of tardiness and the academic performance of the students. That's why before you come up with SOP number 3, itong is there a significant relationship? So this is the proper method when it comes to conducting this specific research. First, you need to identify the frequency of tardiness. Next one, the academic performance, determine the academic performance. And the last one is to identify the relationship between these two variables. That's why you have 3 statement of the problem. Ito namang ito na. Ito. Personality traits and game design preferences of gamers in Davao City. So this study is trying to connect or is trying to determine if there's significant relationship between the personality traits and game design preferences. Meaning, if yung personality traits ba maka-affect ba sa game design preferences ng gamers. So before you come up with that question, you need to determine first, what are the personality traits of the gamers in Davao City? What are the game design preferences of the gamers in Davao City? And then, ito i-correlate niya. So this study, ito yung pinakamahaba na study talaga. Among all the quantitative research studies nung last year sa grade 12, ito yung pinakamahaba. Kasi sa personality traits, merong 5 personality traits. And lahat ng yung 5 personality traits, iniisa-isa. And yung game design preferences, there are 8 preferences. Meaning first, for example, itong neuroticism, i-correlate siya sa 8 game design preferences. That's why hago ka ni siya nga study. Ito yung best, this study was awarded as the best practical research last year. Ito. Okay, 2 types of statement of the problem. The non-researchable questions are questions of value. These are questions that are answerable by yes or no. We also have researchable questions, or questions of value, opinions, or policy raised to gather data. It also answers who, what, where, when, why, and how. Ito yung non-researchable questions is, what do you call that? It's like closed-ended questions, but can only be answered by yes or no. Meaning, di siya pwede gamitin. You cannot use this type of questions in conducting a research. And we have 4 types of researchable questions. We have the factor isolating questions, factor relating questions, situation relating, and situation producing. When we say factor isolating questions, they are sometimes called factor naming questions. In factor naming questions, it only needs the, what do you call that? Yung, halimbawa, what is, yung mga specific lang information sa mga demographic questions like your gender, your age, your civil status. Kaya what is this? Tawag dun sa factor isolating questions. Kasi factor relating questions, their goals to determine the relationship among factors that have been identified. Itong factor relating questions, tawag to, if the study is, what do you call that? The research design is descriptive correlational study. itong factor relating questions. If we want to determine if there are significant relationships between the variables in your study. Itong factor isolating questions, ito yung mga descriptive type of study lang. So, halimbawa ng factor isolating questions yung sa learning styles at saka sa multiple intelligence. You just want to determine what are the learning styles, what are the multiple intelligences. So, itong factor relating questions, if you want to determine the significant relationship of the variables. Like, is there a significant relationship between the personality traits and game design preferences of the gamers in Davao City? Is there a significant relationship between tardiness and academic performance of senior high school students? Is there a significant relationship between the level of speech anxiety and academic performance of grade 11 students? Ano siya? We also have situation relating. These questions usually yield hypothesis testing or experimental study designs in which the researcher manipulates the variables to see what will happen. Example nitong situation relating is yung when you want to determine if there are significant effects. Mga significant effects itong situation relating, like yung sa, although this is a descriptive study, but this is a situation relating yung sa microfinance. The effects of microfinance. Yun siya. Guys, okay lang sa inyo mag-extend tawag few minutes because it's already 11:47. Extend ta kadali ha. Gamay lang man.
Okay, sir.
We also have situation-producing goals. These questions establish explicit goals for actions, develop plans or prescriptions to achieve goals, and specify the conditions under which these goals will be accomplished. Ito namang situation-producing goal. This is not goals. Situation-producing questions ito. If you want to implement something like program or services, and if you want to determine if these programs or services are effective or rational ba siya or reasonable. In order for you to determine if they are rational, reasonable, or effective, you need to conduct a study first. Halimbawa, sa mga student services, sa program implementations, itong situation producing questions usually sa mga mga architecture type of students. Architecture type of thesis, mga research paper sa architecture. So they're going to, kasi I helped once a friend of mine. I helped her writing her research. Tapos yung research ng architecture, they're going to design establishment or building that is conducive or appropriate for a specific context or situation. So before that, before they come up with a specific design for their study, kailangan mag-conduct muna sila ng research if conducive or appropriate ba yung i-design nila. So this is an example of situation producing questions, not research. Next one, the scope and delimitation and the significance of the study. Okay, the scope of the study is determined by the major variables of the study, while sub-variables and their characteristics, attributes, or indicators serve as the delimitation. So when we say the scope and delimitation of the study, it refers to the variables and the respondents of your research. Who are the specific respondents of your study? What are the specific variables and sub-variables in your study. You need to indicate that in your research so that you will know what are your limitations. So a variable is any factor or property that a researcher measures, controls, or manipulates. That's what we discussed earlier. See, concept is generally accepted collection of characteristics. So see, concept is usually the topic or what is your study all about. A construct is a new characteristic that results from the conduct of the research. When you say construct, it usually results from the result of your study. Ano man yung, when you conduct your research, what have you observed? What have you analyzed? In formulating the scope and delimitation, it is essential that the researcher has already defined the major variables of the study, which are contained in the title of the research and general statement of the problem. So, which means that the title, SOP, scope, and delimitation are all connected. That your title should be reflected in your SOP and in your scope and delimitation. Next one, identifying the beneficiaries of the study and the benefits of the study will give them the problem solved. The beneficiaries include individuals like students, pupils, teachers, doctors, principals, parents, and others. The government and governmental organizations and even private institutions. It is also important to note that the benefits of these entities will receive from the research vary from personal benefits to multifaceted benefits. So basically, when we say significance of the study, it talks about who are the personalities, organizations, institutions that can benefit from your study. For example, if you're going to conduct yung learning styles of the students, sino makabenefit ito? You need to identify who are those people who can directly benefit the study. The sequence of beneficiaries of the research starts from the most benefited to the least benefited. The benefits must be specific and arranged according to the degree of significance. So usually, sa significance of the study, yung naka-arrange by alphabetical. But there are also format na gaya nito, according to the degree of significance. Sino yung number one group of people or persons, number one organizations that can benefit your research? Kaya halimbawa, ito, the study, siya, personality traits and game design preferences. So, sino yung makabenefit sa study? Sa itong study, let's try to look at ito. Itong game developers, game players, the teachers, future researchers. So you need to explain why game developers can benefit the study, why the game players can benefit the study, why the teachers can benefit, and why the future researchers can benefit your study. And by the way, I would like to correct my statement earlier, yung sa alphabetical, sa definition of terms pala yung alphabetical, not in the significance of the study. It's about those who can mostly benefit your study. And then that's it. So do you have questions?
Wala,
We're done
sir.
with our lesson discussions. Yes, Samantha. So tomorrow, kailangan makasubmit na kayo sa akin ng topic, ha? At least topic pa lang. Huwag muna title. Kasi yung title nyo, pwede kasing mag-change pa siya. The title and the variables that you want to consider in your research. The title, the topic, and the variables that you want to consider in your research. Are we clear about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's already 11:55. Extend natin ng 5 minutes. I will end na, ha? Okay, bye, guys. Thank you. Have a great lunch.